We got us another bona fide Caitlin Clark hater, and on top of that, she seems to hate Caitlin Clark fans. Mystic Star is mad. Wishy-washy fan base. She calls them out for Caitlin Clark support. These players are certifiably insane. Have you ever seen so much pettiness and so much jealousy? And what's crazy is so much ego?
What unfolded here isn't simple frustration. It's the kind of clash that can tear a locker room apart. Fans think they already know the full story. A player snapped after the game and tossed out a petty remark. But that surface-level version is far from the truth. The reality is much sharper. One of the Mystics' brightest stars stood center stage in front of thousands of loyal, ticket-paying fans, the same supporters who packed Baltimore's arena, and publicly called them out. Picture yourself in that moment. You bought the ticket, dressed in your team's colors, drove miles to the game. And then the very player you came to celebrate looks past you and labels you wishy-washy. What would push her to turn on her own supporters? The very people funding her career and her team's future? The answer isn't simple anger. It's a deep resentment, frustration, and growing tension that has been quietly boiling inside the Wnba for months. The moment those words left her mouth, they ignited a controversy powerful enough to rattle both her career and the franchise she represents. And if you think this storm came from one careless quote, think again, because what unfolded that night was no accident. It was the beginning of a larger saga fueled by money, pride, and a rare kind of public betrayal you almost never witness in professional sports. When the Washington Mystics circled Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever on their schedule, they weren't just preparing for a regular matchup. They were eyeing a golden opportunity. They saw the chance to capitalize on the biggest superstar women's basketball has produced in years. Normally, the Mystics host games inside their cozy, high-energy home arena in DC, seating just over 4,000 diehard fans, a place that truly embodies home court advantage. But for September 7th, the front office made a move that blindsided their own supporters. They abandoned that home floor and shifted the game an hour north to Baltimore's massive CFG Bank Arena, a cavernous venue with nearly 14,000 seats. Why trade comfort and loyalty for uncertainty? The answer is simple: money. Executives saw the Caitlin Clark effect sweeping across the entire league and couldn't resist cashing in. Packed arenas, skyrocketing TV ratings, and non-stop national headlines. The writing was on the wall. The Mystics front office knew that if they shifted this matchup onto a bigger stage, Caitlin Clark's massive fan base would flood the building and guarantee a payday too tempting to turn down. This wasn't a gift to the loyal Mystics faithful. It wasn't about honoring home court pride or rewarding the season ticket holders who had carried the franchise for years. No, this was a ruthless, calculated gamble, profit prioritized over tradition. The team was fully aware the arena would likely be overtaken by Clark's supporters wearing Fever jerseys, and they were willing to accept that reality. At first, the bold move seemed like it might collapse. Just days before tip-off, Clark went down with an injury that ruled her out for the remainder of the season. The centerpiece of the entire marketing plan wouldn't even step foot on the court. For a moment, the grand scheme looked doomed. But Clark's star power proved untouchable. Even sitting in street clothes, she pulled in a staggering crowd. Nearly 12,000 fans packed the building just to see her on the bench. Financially, the risk paid off. The seats were filled, the arena roared, and the Mystics front office cashed in. All the players had to do was hoop, collect the check, and keep things calm. But for Shakira Austin, that night in Baltimore became something much bigger than basketball. What should have been a normal home game turned into a personal breaking point in front of a crowd that didn't feel like hers. From the very first step onto the hardwood, it was clear this didn't feel like home. The arena was loud, the cheers were deafening, but they weren't for her, and they weren't for the Mystics. Nearly every roar inside that cavernous building was reserved for someone not even in uniform. Caitlin Clark, sitting courtside in street clothes. Picture that scene. You grind all season long, prepare for what's supposed to be your home matchup, and yet every time Clark's face flashes across the giant jumbotron, the crowd erupts like it's her show. For a competitor as proud and fiery as Shakira Austin, the moment had to sting like a gut punch. She fought through the game, but the frustration was written all over her body language. And when the final buzzer echoed, that bottled-up tension exploded. Instead of showing gratitude to the nearly 12,000 people who had paid for tickets, parking, and seats, Austin let her emotions take control. In her post-game remarks, she dismissed Clark's supporters as wishy-washy fans and openly criticized the lack of genuine Mystics backing, aiming her frustration directly at the very crowd that had just delivered the franchise's biggest turnout of the season. The irony was brutal. Those so-called wishy-washy fans were the exact audience the front office had spent weeks trying to lure in. What Austin intended as a release of personal frustration instantly morphed into something heavier, a spark that transformed a financial gamble into full-blown controversy, and her team's quiet resentment into a very public wound. The fallout went far beyond a few heated words. What Shakira Austin unleashed that night struck at the very core of the Mystics' business plan, their reputation, and even her own fragile standing in the league. The reason her outburst exploded like wildfire wasn't just the sting of the insult itself. It was about who she insulted and what it exposed about the team's delicate reality. In professional sports, there's one golden, unspoken rule every athlete understands. You never attack the paying fans who keep the lights on. That is the line you simply don't cross. Austin didn't just step over it. She crushed it underfoot by branding the crowd wishy-washy. And in doing so, she wasn't only calling out Caitlin Clark's traveling supporters. She was tearing down the very foundation of the Mystics' financial strategy. The front office had already sacrificed home court pride in exchange for a bigger payday, fully aware that Baltimore's arena would be flooded with Clark's fan base. For that one night, those visitors weren't outsiders. They were the lifeline, the reason seats were full, the reason revenue skyrocketed. Yet with a single bitter interview, Austin turned those paying customers into targets and dragged her own team's business gamble straight into the mud. What Austin really did was shine a harsh spotlight on the one truth the Mystics had been desperate to keep hidden. Their largest home crowd of the season wasn't there for them. It was there for the other team's star. For the front office, that reality was nothing short of a disaster. Yes, the financial gamble delivered, but Austin's words instantly flipped a business win into a public relations nightmare. Instead of headlines celebrating record attendance, the story became about a player turning on the very people who filled the arena. This wasn't just bad optics. It was betrayal, a blow that cut deep into the organization's core. The Mystics had already sacrificed their home court advantage for money. Austin, in one frustrated moment, sacrificed that money by alienating the fans who made it possible. That's why this was never just a petty jab. Austin didn't simply vent. She dismantled the illusion her own franchise had carefully built to survive in an overcrowded sports marketplace. But her words also cracked open something even bigger than one game or one team. They pulled back the curtain on a league-wide issue that has been quietly boiling for months. And it all starts with Caitlin Clark. The tension inside the Mystics' locker room wasn't only about emotions or ego. It was about cold, unforgiving numbers. And numbers, unlike words, never lie. When the Mystics moved their September 7th matchup to Baltimore's massive CFG Bank Arena, they knew they were taking a high-stakes gamble. Their home gym in DC seats just over 4,000. Baltimore, nearly 14,000, more than triple the size. On paper, the switch promised everything a franchise dreams of: higher ticket sales, booming merchandise revenue, and a prime opportunity to ride the unstoppable wave of Caitlin Clark's star power. And then, the unthinkable twist hit, the kind of moment no franchise ever wants to face. Caitlin Clark's season-ending injury removed her from the game entirely. For almost any other athlete, that kind of blow would have spelled financial disaster. Ticket holders would demand refunds, scalpers would panic, and empty seats would stand as a humiliating reminder of lost opportunity. But that's not how it played out. Clark's gravitational pull was so overwhelming that even in street clothes, she turned the matchup into a spectacle. Nearly 11,883 fans poured into the arena just to watch her sit on the bench. Think about that, close to 3 times the Mystics' usual home crowd, and she never even touched a basketball. Yet beneath those record-breaking numbers was a painful truth. one that quietly shredded the Mystics' pride. Roughly 3,000 ticket holders decided not to show up the moment they learned Clark wouldn't play. These were people who had already spent their money, but without Clark on the floor, the game wasn't worth their time. That's the brutal reality. The draw wasn't Washington's playoff hopes. They were already out of the race. It wasn't loyalty to the home team. It was Caitlin Clark herself. Her mere presence, not her performance, dragged over 10,000 people into the building. For the front office, the night was a double-edged sword. Financially, it was undeniable success, but emotionally, it exposed a truth they would have rather buried deep. Take Caitlin Clark out of the equation, and suddenly the Mystics couldn't pull an audience anywhere near that size. That's the uncomfortable truth Shakira Austin accidentally screamed to the world by labeling the crowd wishy-washy. She wasn't just throwing shade. She was shining a spotlight on what the numbers had already revealed. The Mystics weren't the headliners that night. The fans came for someone else. Her words cut so deep not only because they were disrespectful, but because they echoed a reality the entire organization had been working overtime to bury. The front office hadn't moved the game for Washington's loyal DC fan base. They moved it for Clark's fan base, the very same group Austin mocked on live television. For a professional athlete, admitting the majority of the crowd belongs to the opposing team's superstar is humiliating. Austin's frustration had roots in something real. Any competitor would feel slighted in that moment, but by saying it out loud, she confirmed the harsh math the Mystics' marketing department was desperate to hide. Every one of those 3,000 empty seats told the same cold story. People bought tickets for Clark, and when she wasn't playing, they stayed home. And the nearly 12,000 who still came just to see her sit courtside in street clothes proved the other side of that equation. This wasn't just about a bitter post-game comment. It was a public reminder of the brutal hierarchy of attention that defines today's WNBA. Spotlight that a single rookie managed to attract crowds that outshined the entire home roster, and the rest of the league was forced to confront that uncomfortable imbalance whether they wanted to or not. In the end, the cold statistics did more damage to the Mystics' pride than Shakira Austin's frustrated rant ever could. The numbers didn't just reveal who sells tickets. They revealed who truly holds the power. That's what makes Austin's eruption so significant. It wasn't simple venting. It was confirmation of an ugly truth the league had been quietly whispering about for months. And the fallout didn't stop at attendance charts. The resentment toward Caitlin Clark was never just one player's issue or one team's drama. It was a league-wide tension that Austin's public comments finally yanked into the open. The storm that swallowed the Mystics that night wasn't just local controversy. It was a window into something much bigger. A growing divide that fans, players, and executives all recognize: the Caitlin Clark effect. From the very moment Clark stepped into the WNBA, the numbers flipped overnight. Her game sold out arenas that had never seen capacity before. TV ratings skyrocketed. Merchandise flew off the shelves. For the league's business side, Clark was everything they had been waiting for: a bona fide mainstream superstar capable of drawing casual fans by name alone. Sponsorships surged. Ticket sales soared, and even the day-to-day lives of players began to transform as new revenue flooded in. Charter flights, upgraded hotels, national TV deals. All of these perks suddenly appeared as Caitlin Clark's spotlight grew brighter with every game. But for many veterans who had been grinding in the league for years without that kind of recognition, it was a bitter pill to swallow. Practically overnight, a rookie had become the face of the WNBA, while the very players who had carried the league through its toughest years felt like they had been pushed into the shadows. This frustration rarely reached the headlines, but it simmered in locker rooms, in late-night conversations, in cryptic social media posts, and in carefully phrased interview comments. Fans began picking up on the subtle digs, remarks about media favorites, complaints about certain players getting all the calls, whispers that the league only cared about one name. Most veterans were disciplined enough to keep those feelings bottled up, but the resentment was real, and for Shakira Austin, it finally broke through the surface. Her wishy-washy fans' remark wasn't just frustration about one Baltimore crowd. It was the sound of a deeper resentment that had been brewing ever since Clark entered the league. That's why her words cut so sharply. Austin wasn't the only player who felt overshadowed, but she was the first to say it in a way no one could ignore. And by doing so, she shattered the unspoken pact around the league. You can resent the spotlight Clark receives, but you never, ever go after the fans who fuel the revenue. The reaction across the WNBA was split, and the ripple effects were impossible to contain behind closed doors. Some players quietly admitted they understood Austin's frustration, but none dared to echo it publicly. Others rushed to distance themselves, fully aware that attacking fans, especially Clark's fans, was the fastest road to career suicide. For the league office, her comments were nothing short of a nightmare scenario. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie sensation. She was the engine driving the WNBA's record-breaking year. Anything that risked alienating her fan base threatened to derail the fragile momentum the league had fought so hard to build. What went down that night in Baltimore wasn't just a random flare-up. It was proof of a deeper fault line splitting the league. The WNBA's growth depends on Clark's star power, yet some of its very players resent it. That paradox has no easy fix, because the same force fueling the league's rise is also creating cracks between teammates, rivals, and even fans themselves. Austin's outburst was the loudest, most public sign of that resentment, but it raised a much bigger question. How much damage had already been done? To her own career, to the Mystics' fragile chemistry, and to the polished image the league had been selling to sponsors. And for Austin personally, the fallout may have been even more dramatic. Because after that night, her reputation, and perhaps her future in the WNBA, would never look the same again. The ripple effects of her words didn't end with a few ugly headlines. They trailed her into the locker room, into tense front office meetings, and even into the hushed conversations of team owners around the league. In the days that followed, the fallout was brutal. Clips of Austin's wishy-washy fans remark flooded sports talk shows, dominated social media debates, and became a running topic on podcasts. The moment was everywhere, impossible to outrun, made worse by the fact that Austin never apologized. That silence said more than any press release ever could. For the Mystics, the timing was catastrophic. The season was already lost, morale was dragging, and now one of their own players had gifted the media a headline that drowned out everything else. What should have been remembered as the team's biggest home crowd of the year was instead framed as a PR disaster, one about resentment, envy, and fractured fan loyalty. But the real blow landed on Austin herself. Her reputation didn't just take a hit with the public. It suffered with the people who matter most: the decision-makers, the executives, the owners. In today's WNBA, marketability counts nearly as much as box scores. And Austin had suddenly branded herself as a liability, a talented player who might alienate the very fans franchises depend on to survive. For her personally, the timing couldn't have been worse. Austin now enters free agency at the worst possible moment, a time when teams don't just study stat sheets, but also weigh character, chemistry, and locker room influence. One heated remark can't erase her on-court talent, but it does plant a dangerous red flag for any owner considering an investment. The real question isn't only whether the Mystics will re-sign her, it's whether any franchise is willing to gamble on a player who publicly clashed with the league's biggest box office star and mocked the fans who keep the seats filled. For executives, that kind of risk is toxic. No owner wants the distraction of headlines questioning team unity or threatening ties to the league's golden ticket, Caitlin Clark. For teammates, the sting cuts even deeper. Imagine sitting in that locker room, knowing the charter flights, the upgraded hotels, and the surge of money and media attention all came because of Clark's influence. Then watching your own teammate lash out at the very people who made it possible. Trust like that doesn't heal easily. Austin's career now hangs in a precarious balance. Months ago, she was just another young player approaching free agency, ready to negotiate her next deal. Today, she's the center of a controversy, larger than basketball itself, one that has forced the entire league to face an uncomfortable truth about who really drives its momentum and shapes its future. Some argue Austin's raw talent will ultimately outweigh the drama, that somewhere a franchise will roll the dice on her. Others see her outburst as a permanent scar, a liability no team can afford. Either way, one thing is certain: her words that night didn't just cost her goodwill. They may have cost her millions, her reputation, and the secure future she once assumed was waiting. but the fallout extends far beyond one player. Austin's slip pulled back the curtain on cracks the WNBA has been desperate to keep hidden. The balance between growing the sport through a single superstar and honoring the veterans who build it is far more fragile than anyone dared to admit. As Austin waits in limbo for her next contract, the league itself faces a harsher question. Can it keep riding Caitlin Clark's unprecedented wave without deepening the resentment festering inside its own locker rooms? The answers will shape not only Austin's future, but the WNBA's very identity. Because what happened in Baltimore was never just a feud between a player and the fans. It was the sound of a foundation splintering, proof that the league is at war with itself, and that the battle lines have already been drawn. On one side stands the business of basketball, the owners, marketers, and TV networks chasing every ounce of momentum Caitlin Clark has unleashed. To them, she isn't just a rookie. She's the centerpiece of the WNBA's future. The face that fills arenas, drives ratings, and sells the dream of what women's basketball can become. On the other side are the players who've been here for years. The ones who built their careers in the shadows, grinding through empty arenas, fighting for better pay, for charter flights, for the basic respect of being treated like professionals. And now, in what feels like an instant, every headline, every perk, every opportunity seems to orbit around one newcomer. That imbalance can't be smoothed over with press releases or locker room speeches. It's deeper than that. A quiet resentment has been simmering, unspoken but very real. A feeling that no matter how hard they've worked, their contributions will always pale in comparison to the influence of one player. Shakira Austin's outburst may have been the spark, but the divide was already there. Her words dragged into the open what the league has tried to keep hidden, that the WNBA is more dependent on Caitlin Clark than it dares to admit. And the Mystics' gamble that night, trading home court pride for Clark-driven profits, showed just how fragile that balance really is. And with Austin's words, the illusion shattered. The WNBA now faces a dilemma it can't outrun. To rise, it needs Caitlin Clark's spotlight. But the brighter that light burns, the deeper the shadows grow for everyone else. It's a paradox that threatens to split the league from within. This was never just about one game, one arena, or one frustrated player. It's about the future of a league caught between gratitude and resentment, between ambition and unity. The question isn't whether Shakira Austin regrets what she said. The question is how long the WNBA can keep expanding when its greatest asset is also its greatest fault line. Because if a single outburst can shake the league this much, what happens when the next spark ignites? Or when the next star rises and tilts the balance all over again? For the Mystics, the fallout may echo for years. For Austin, her career now hangs in limbo. And for the WNBA, that night in Baltimore may be remembered not for the record crowd, but as the moment the cracks in its foundation could no longer be ignored.